Jaclyn, I can't believe this is actually happening. We were laughing right before I hit record, and it's just been a while for Jaclyn and I to connect to actually do an episode. And we probably were talking about since June, maybe a little after that. I don't know. I don't remember around the time. It was definitely summertime, right? And we had some technical difficulties and, everything going on. Anyways, here we are today. And, I don't know a lot about you, which is good. So I know there's a lot of things you're doing. I know you have a podcast and, it's based on trauma and everything. But let's just start with you just sharing who you are and, what you do besides maybe just the podcast.
Okay. So first though, Jon, I wanted to also kind of laugh alongside you that we're actually doing it. We were talking just before we hit record and we don't know the number of times. So I think that speaks volumes to how long we've been trying, but I'm really happy to be here guesting. And just a bit about me, aside from the podcast, I work as a frontline worker. So I work in social services. The population that I'm with is the homeless. And so I live in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and I work in London. So London has somewhere around like 400,000 people. There's a lot, but there's also a big homeless population. And so my role is to, in an ideal world when, there's not the housing crisis and all of the craziness going on, house them and then work on their mental health and their addictions and often they have legal issues. So any court stuff, working their way through court, working on probation orders, any of that stuff. So that's my actual full-time job, aside from the podcast. And then my part-time job, I'm actually a developmental service worker. So I essentially think PSW, personal support worker, but instead of being kind of a general population, it's those with developmental disabilities or delays, a lot of medical needs, complex, just overall. I work in their home, so there's 6 residents, and I support all of them with cooking, cleaning, med administration, diabetes, insulin injections if needed, feed tubes, a whole bunch of different medical stuff. So I've been doing that one part-time for, I think I'm coming up on 9 years now. And then my full-time, I'm about to hit 5 years. So very hands-on in the helping profession.
Cool. And so what is it that inspires you to help all these people out and have these jobs?
So I guess it kind of stems back to when I was really young. Like basically for as long as I can remember, I always felt different from people, and not in the sense of like looking different or whatever, more internal. So what I now know anyways to be anxiety, I always felt that even like in grade 1, but it was less of, I don't want to say less serious, because even as a kid, you still have possible serious stuff going on. But more as a kid, I was always worried, what if my outfit didn't look right? Or what if the teacher called on me and I didn't know the answer? Or, when you go around the circle and you read like a chapter or whatever in a book in a class, and you always like count forward the 10 or 12 pages or whatever it is for it to be you. That was me. But I did that with everything. Just like general anxiety over seems to be the little kind of silly things, but it started back then. I grew up with a broken family, I guess you could call. So my parents were divorced when I was 5. A lot of shuffling back and forth. My dad was in and out of jail for some domestic, some assaults, drinking under the influence of DUIs. My mom raised us primarily solo, just because he was in and out of incarceration, but also my grandma was there a lot, so she babysat us until we went to school. The times when my dad wasn't incarcerated, I was seeing him, kind of every other weekend, typical parent switch off, but he also comes from a long family of addiction. What I thought back then was only alcohol, I've learned now is not necessarily just alcohol. So my dad's brother, my uncle, struggles with substance addiction. And then my grandma, my grandpa, my dad all struggle with alcohol. And then it goes way back generations. But I kind of was in the midst of that as a child, listening to all the yelling and screaming and drunken nights. And when I'd go to my dad's, it was always, oh, we're going to grandma's, but that's where it would all happen. So I was very in the middle of chaos for a lot of the childhood. My mom remarried what felt like to be a year or two after their divorce, so it seemed really quick. He was not a very nice man, treated us differently than their own kids because we simply weren't his. Very controlling, very emotionally abusive, but in very subtle ways that if you met him, you wouldn't know. I know some people are just outward abusive, others try to be a bit more subtle, so he was the latter of that. And then just with the anxiety growing up as a kid, I struggled since basically grade 1. I guess I didn't have it. I experienced a sexual assault when I was in 8th grade. And I won't get into details about that, but some of the things that the guy said to me kind of stuck with me, like, you know, you're going to end up doing these things anyways with people, so you may as well start now, and you may as well do all these things. And he essentially put in my mind that I wasn't enough. I wasn't pretty enough or thin enough or smart enough, so other people weren't going to like me, but he did, so I was almost forced to do things. So that kind of stuck in my mind going into high school. High school, I struggled with an eating disorder for multiple years. I didn't feel like I had really control of my life because he was also in the back of my mind saying, you know, you're not enough. Nobody's going to want you, all of these things. So I tried extra hard. I struggled with alcohol in high school, which was taking a few years ahead here when my best friend was killed in 12th grade. So I coped with alcohol for several months. And then I kind of took a step back and realized, you know, if I don't stop, I'm going to end up just exactly how my family presents. And that's kind of the last thing that I wanted. So I've definitely had my fair share of struggles with substance as well. But in the midst of the eating disorder, I didn't feel like I had control, which is why I went to the restricting and controlling of my diet and exercise. But I also engaged in self-harm. I also struggled with suicidal ideation. I was also diagnosed at the time with depression. Just a whole bunch of different things that had happened in those years. And then realizing, I think the biggest part for me was realizing when I was struggling with all these things, I didn't feel like I had somebody to turn to. You know how people always say, well, I'm always here for you, but it's that starting that conversation. I didn't feel like I had the ability to start that conversation with anybody. So just felt super alone, really struggled, in and out of therapy, a lot of medication, outpatient hospital programs and treatments for the eating disorder. I can say I'm in recovery now for, I think I'm going on 6 or 7 years now. Sober by choice, so I choose not to drink, especially knowing kind of where my family comes from and the pathway I don't want to take. So just, I guess a combination to answer your question was just a lot of my personal experiences partnered with how lonely and isolating and depressed I felt, but also not wanting others to feel that way, even though I know people feel that way all the time, but trying to get them to feel less alone, less unworthy, they are enough, just those reminders, because those really are huge. And so fast forward a little bit, when my best friend was killed when I was 17 in grade 12, that sparked me to go into university. I studied social work and law, but she was the reason I studied law, because I wanted to understand how that could even happen, how somebody could be murdered and, you know, the world kind of goes on and it's just normal for people. So I studied a whole bunch of law, and then I realized, you know, people that are in the legal system often are struggling with trauma and addiction and mental health. And so that kind of segued me into my full-time job that I have now. And then that also brought about the podcast as well, where, you know, I talk to guests all over the world and myself, but we talk about our traumas, possible addictions, just any topic that relates to mental health, trauma, and addiction, just to raise awareness, break down the stigma. I mean, it's 2023, but, the world is still filled with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and just struggle overall. So ideally, I would like to help people not feel how I felt, right? Because there's always going to be struggle, no matter who we are or where we are. But I think to make the struggle a little bit less of a struggle, we can support each other and love each other, like, all around the world, and just try to empower and have the conversation so they know, hey, you might be struggling, but so am I, so we can struggle together, I think is really huge, especially kind of given the circumstances of how the world is nowadays. I think that was a really long-winded answer, but there's your answer for you.
No, you're good. I get it. So you went through all this stuff, and then somehow on the back end of it, you're helping other people, right? And that's really what it comes down to. Yes, I know you dove into a lot of stuff, but all that, you had to go through all that to get to where you are today, right? And totally. Yes, I know you're still struggling with things, but you're doing it, and you're showing up in front of all these other people, the podcast and everything else that you're doing, to say that you can do it, and so can they, right? And
absolutely,
you're connecting with so many people to support others. I too, I decided to quit drinking it's been about a year ago for me. Not to say that I was heavy into drinking, but my dad passed because of a heart attack, and he was heavy into drinking. And I heard that he was in other stuff too, although I never really explored that. So I just didn't want to go down that same path either. And, so I can relate that with you, from where I was getting emotional stuff, and I found myself drinking more, and it's just not who I want to be. Right. So push that aside. Now you get to be who you are, and you can show up to present yourself to all these other people that you're helping, and let them know that they can too also stop drinking or whatever it is that they're going through, and get to that point where they can be themselves. So I mean, I commend you for doing everything that you're doing, and, you're still getting help, and which is good, so don't stop, just keep chugging along. I don't know if you want to jump into one area of your journey that really hit you hard. If you went through a bunch of stuff, you gained a lot. So, I mean, if there's one that really sticks out that really hit you, what would you say? Which one was it?
I mean, I think you are right in the sense that I had to experience all of them to kind of get to where I am, but I would say it was probably one of my best friends being killed. Not only was I 17, but I was still in grade 12. I was still, not super mature, but not a child necessarily. But I think that just kind of woke me up to how the world actually is. I never thought anything like that could happen in a small town. I think it was maybe 5,000 people there. It was a small town. It was just bigger than an intersection, I guess. But you never really think that something like that's going to happen. You just, you see it in movies or you hear it. And for me in Canada, Toronto, I don't really know the big American cities, but you just think it's in a bigger spot. And then when it happens, it kind of rocks your world. And I definitely did a lot of therapy, a lot of antidepressants, journaling. That's actually kind of where I got into gratitude practice. Because, all of these things are really crappy and there's a dark cloud, but if you can show your gratitude, that kind of helps a little bit with realizing what you do have rather than what you don't have. So I try to do a gratitude practice every day now, actually, which stemmed from that almost 11 years ago. So that was one thing that really, in a positive light, came from that experience. The other one was journaling. I don't do it as often as maybe I should or could benefit from, but I definitely learned, a therapist, despite what some movies show, they're not available 24/7. If you're having a crisis or you're having an episode or an incident happened, you can't necessarily just call them and say, I need to talk to you right now, and they'll clear the schedule. As lovely as that would be, sometimes you have to do things kind of on your own until you get to the next appointment. And so Journaling was a really big one that I learned. I kind of call it a brain dump. So instead of journaling, because people have journal prompts too, right? Where, some people will post this specific question and you journal based on that. When I was in between therapy sessions, it was more, let's just clear your head, get whatever out. So I'd literally just get a piece of paper, a journal, whatever it is, and I would just sit there and write and write and write anything that came to mind. Didn't have to be about my friend, didn't have to be about therapy. It was just kind of emptying out and kind of releasing all of that energy and sadness and grief and anger and whatever else was in there at the time. That was a really big one as well. And I still do that. I find there's a lot of nights where if I can't sleep, I'll kind of brain dump again. And not that it just is a magic cure, but it definitely helps the brain kind of slow down and relax and be a bit more present. And a lot of people struggle with being present. So that's a big one for me as well. But I mean, ultimately, I think her passing sparked my interest in law and legal stuff, law enforcement, how police operate, like detective work, all of that kind of stuff, because like I said, it was a murder. And I'd seen it on movies, I'd seen it on TV shows, CSI, all of that, but it's really different when it's in person and it's, your own life and you can't just turn it off. And so it did spark my interest and I did go to school for it. But then I guess I can also see the other side of where the guy that did kill her kind of was at. I mean, I don't understand necessarily the mindset or what he was thinking per se, but I can understand that there's a lot more factors than just he did what he did. And that's taken me a really long time to come to that as well. But even with the clients that I work with at my full-time job, they all, for the most part anyways, they all have a criminal record. And I'm not saying it's murder or manslaughter or anything of that nature, but I think, you see somebody who has a record of 100 different charges or convictions, you think they're this big, bad, scary person, but really when you look into it, they're human and they're struggling. And that was also a really big takeaway that I had. Not that I necessarily forgave him for the act that he did do, but I kind of felt a lot of empathy and maybe grief and sorrow for him as well, knowing, he was going through whatever he was going through to cause him to do this action. And now he's currently sitting in jail for years and years, right? So there's definitely been things I've learned from it and still learning. I'm still in therapy dealing kind of with the grief and I guess complications of all of that came out of it. Still learning. I mean, I preach coping mechanisms and self-care. I'm still learning those myself. And I think it's also important to note that just because you have one coping mechanism that you've used for the last 3 years, maybe it doesn't work anymore. It's okay to switch it up. That's something I've also really had to learn. How I used to cope, which was alcohol 11 years ago, is certainly not how I do now. And so that's kind of that transition as well. We're constantly improving and learning and just trying to better ourselves and see what the world is really about. But I truthfully think that if she hadn't passed, I don't think I would have went into supporting those in legal struggles and social work. Like when I first got my anxiety and anorexia and depression diagnosis at 14 in grade 9, and I had to start seeing a therapist because it was mandated. I didn't have a choice at the time. And so she was the one that got me into thinking maybe I could do, social work, maybe I could do counseling. But once I started doing high school courses with the electives, I learned, I liked that, but I wasn't for sure on it. And then as soon as my friend Nicole died, it was like an instant. So I don't really know what I would be doing passion-wise, career-wise now had that not actually happened, because there was so many other different avenues. I really wanted to be a vet at the time. And so there's a lot to learn from her passing, but also still a lot to deal with. But that would be the probably biggest incident or crisis that I experienced that, obviously still has effects to this day, 11 years later, and probably will 10 more years and 20 more years. But it's something that contributed huge to where I am now and what I continue to do as well too.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, I heard this quote and I wanted to share it if that's okay. I don't really know who quoted it, so I'm not taking credit for it. But it was something about a person asked somebody else, why are you sharing your story? Why are you sharing, your struggles, your grief, your anger, your whatever it is, any part of the story? And the other person said back to them, because then it can help somebody else. And I think that I heard that years ago and that still stuck with me. And I think that's kind of I don't want to say my why, but I think it's part of my why as to why I'm doing the work that I do now and in supporting those with all of their struggles too.
Yeah, I can see that. And just to go back, you said it's been 11 years. So obviously things take time, right? And no matter what it is, some people can get over things quicker and others can't. So I would say there's no timeline on that whatsoever. The fact is that you are seeking help, and you're being open about that. And the people that you are working with, I'm hoping that, they're looking for it as well. And if not, you have the support system, it sounds like, and you can provide to that, what was the service, whatever it is you guys have to help them. I would agree that, yes, these people are stuck and they're not aware that they can find help in a way, and I know that's what you're doing, not just in employment, but also on the back end of the podcast as well, is sharing that with others that, people can reach out. So yeah, you are sharing your journey in life so that other people can learn from it. So, I mean, that quote was great. But I don't know. I never heard of it either, so maybe we'll have to dig deep and find out who it was. I mean, it could be Jaclyn for all I know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I just don't want to take the credit, not yet, until I get maybe I'll paraphrase it somehow. But I heard it and it was so accurate that, a lot of people are always, why are you sharing your story? Or why are you talking about that really dark point? And it's really, truly is to make people aware that everybody struggles. Both, and I don't know all of your backstory either, Jon, but I know you've struggled and I've struggled, and at some point everybody will. I think that's the reality of being a human. And so maybe we don't struggle at the same time or with the same thing, but we can still be that support system. We can still lean on each other and have that kind of underlying thought that I'm hurting right now or I'm struggling right now, but I'm not alone. Nobody's alone. And I think the other important piece, if I can mention it, is exactly what you said was, yeah, maybe I'm considered a professional by employment or career, but that doesn't necessarily take away that I'm still human and I still struggle, right? We kind of have this maybe stereotype or stigma a little bit that those in the helping profession, especially with mental health clients, that we don't struggle. And that's also something I've been really working to kind of break down that thought, because almost everybody I know at work, between the both places of employment, they struggle themselves mentally or physically. But yeah, they're still there day after day showing up for others and showing, you can still struggle and be successful, or you can still struggle and at least achieve your goals and whatever success looks like to you. And so I think it's a really big conversation to have, that just because somebody is considered a professional doesn't mean they don't struggle. I know people that work in alongside me and they take medication as well, or they're in therapy as well. And that's great. I love that. I love that for anybody that does that. If you need it, you need it. If you don't, okay, cool. But I think it's a really heavy at times, but an important conversation to have, that mental health and trauma and addiction don't just pick low income or certain races. It's everybody.
And that's hard, that kind of line of work. I mean, obviously there's some kind of passion there for what you're doing, right? But you are in front of these people all the time that are suffering, and you have to take all that in. That's a lot to take in, and it also, you can look at it, the medical professions too. There's people, I know there's people that are countless hours working all the time, and I'm sure they get to a point where they're like, I can't do it anymore. Like, it's tired, and they just have to deal with another bullet wound or something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not in that area. I don't talk to a lot of people that do that, but that's got to be a lot to take in, you know, and day in and day out over again. Yeah, that could take a toll on it. So, I mean, you sharing that people in your line of work are experience the same thing as well, you know, that opens it up a lot too. You know, not, but you said everybody's human, so nobody's perfect. But do you guys talk about that amongst yourself as coworkers?
Yeah, definitely. The one office with my full-time job, there's 4 of us females, and then my manager is male. But the 4 of us, my manager's kind of in and out of the office a lot. He manages a lot of different programs, but the 4 of us do check-ins with each other like all the time. You know, how was so-and-so? How was court today? How was dealing with the police officers? How was, you know, doing groceries with somebody, whatever it was. And so I think that is important as well. But we check in even before shift starts. So, you know, how are you feeling today? What can us as a team support you with, professionally or personally? And then kind of throughout the day, we'll check in, you know, how's it going with this client, or how's it going with this process, whatever. How are you? And then if something happens, we always debrief. We always talk about it. I think the important part too is it's not necessarily super formal. Yes, we're professionals. Yes, we're governed by certain bodies and all of that. But when it comes down to it, debriefing doesn't have to be, or venting or getting it off your chest does not have to look very formal and standardized. It can be whatever is needed, but we definitely do that a lot. We actually encourage each other to take personal days. So the place that I work at, we actually switched from calling it sick days to being personal days. Sick implied, you know, a flu, a cold, COVID, whatever. Whereas personal can be, maybe I don't have daycare this day, but it's more so you're not feeling up to it, but you're not sick. You need that day to, you know, read a book or sleep or be alone, whatever it is. So we encourage each other to do that a lot. We encouraged each other to take our breaks that we're supposed to get, but in our field, it's often hard to take them when people are in crisis all the time, or we're in and out of courts or the police station or whatever it is. So we encourage each other to do that a lot. We also encourage each other to use our full personal days and vacation days. Don't leave any behind, because, you know, that's kind of proactive self-care, proactive to not burn out. I mean, we're in a really hard field and there's going to be burnout, but I think if we can take these steps, it's maybe a bit less likely to happen, or maybe it will be a little less intense when we do experience it. The other one that we always encourage each other to do, especially at this time of year, is to use our benefits. You know, we have coverage for like massage and therapy and acupuncture, medication, like all of that. We always say, you know, if you need it, you need it. No shame in that. Go get your medication. Go get a massage. Go do what you need, what your body needs. Because yes, our body tells us I'm exhausted, but maybe, you know, mentally we need that medication, but physically our body might need acupuncture or chiro or something like that, right? So we definitely, and we talk about our struggles all the time. We always, you know, how was your weekend? Oh, this happened and this really sucked. So give me a little grace today, or I might be a bit slower. I'm exhausted because this happened. Thankfully, I have a really good team that we can actually have those conversations. And it's not just, okay, you're at work, put all your stuff aside and go support the people, because that's not realistic, right? As humans, totally not realistic. So yeah, we have a really good team, and we really do try to focus on all of us, not just who we support, because again, I don't know who said the quote, but you can't take care of somebody else if you're not taking care of yourself too. And so, cliche, but it's true. Really true.
Yeah, you got to take care of yourself first, and then you can help others. Otherwise, you're not strong enough to take care of everybody else.
Or you're in burnout.
Yeah,
And then,
exactly. That's it.
and then maybe you're, adding to the mental health struggles or the trauma that they're already experiencing because you are not in a great place yourself, trying to support, right? There's a lot of different possibilities that could happen with that.
All right. No, absolutely right. I just want to touch back. You mentioned you journal and stuff, and that you don't do as much, but you probably should. Is there anything else that you would say that you still do or should go back to besides journaling that would help you out?
To go back to, I would definitely say journaling. If you were to ask me what I should continue, I would probably have more answers for you, which I'm happy to share. I've recently been starting to get a lot better with boundaries. So the best example I could probably give is when I started the podcast, I would just go, go, go. Like, I want as many guests as I can. I want to record as much as I can, have to be active off and on all day, do all of these things. And so I'm starting to put boundaries in place that, I need alone time. I need to recharge myself, not even from technology, just the world, from people, whatever. So I think to continue to maintain my boundaries and actually enforce them is huge. The other one I think would be listening to my body. The one part that I did not mention in kind of all my struggles is that I was recently diagnosed with Crohn's disease about a year ago now. And so for those that don't know, it's an autoimmune disorder, and essentially your body is kind of fighting itself and you're not getting all the nutrients. Your body just isn't working at its full function. And so there's a lot of stomach and bowel and digestive struggles. And so I'm slowly learning to actually listen to my body, and something that I think we should all do, and we should do as soon as possible, but that's not necessarily realistic. But listening to my body, taking a rest, or resting when I feel I need it rather than when it's too late and I'm already exhausted, is something that I've been really striving for lately. Continuing therapy, I think, everybody could benefit from it, even if you didn't have a major trauma event. We all need to just kind of offload and release energy and whatever it is that we're feeling. The other big one, which I've actually learned from a lot of my guests on the podcast, is to feel your feelings. And it sounds really small and minor and almost kind of silly, but a lot of people don't feel them. And I'm totally guilty of this. I know if I'm having a bad day, but I know I have to go see somebody or I have to go to work and all I want to do is cry, or I'm angry and I just want to explode, I'll just shove it back down, put on a smile and show up to work and fake it, right? And not saying that's, sometimes I guess we might have to do that, but at least set aside a time or a space or whatever it is that we need to actually feel those, because your body is just holding on to all of that and it's making it worse. And so somebody told me that a few months ago, and I was just mind blown at how simple that sounds, but how we just, for the most part, humans don't do that, right? And it's partly probably how we're grown up or how we're raised, how we grow up, the environment, all of that. But society also doesn't want us to feel the bad emotions, and just kind of shove it aside and feel only the happy, joyous, excitement, surprised emotions, not what people often call bad would be like grief or anger or sadness or shame or guilt, any of those. And so those are probably the biggest ones that I would need to continue, and I would encourage others to do as well. It's not just, like I said, it's not just something that people could benefit from if they've struggled. I think it's something anybody could benefit from.
Yeah, I think the feeling that you're talking about, I believe that's a big thing. Like, a lot of people need to open up and share their feelings, their emotions, because if it don't, like you said, it stays inside of you. Then it's going to come out at the wrong time. When you're going to say something or do something that you don't mean to do, because it's been building up forever, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you just have that, hopefully that person you communicate something with, and they could just receive it, and they don't have to give you any pushback or nothing. They just listen to you. You probably feel so much better. You know what I mean? You can go about your day, whatever it is, and enjoy life, right? I had a little episode the other day with, my kid, right? And it was nothing, but it was just so, they have to, even as kids, like they hold it in too, because it just everybody kind of like shuts them down, right? And that shouldn't be the case. It should not be the case at all, because even as my kids are still young, they're gonna continue to do that as they get older, and then they're not going to express themselves in front of the people that they care and love, that much, because they're afraid that they're going to hurt their feelings, when it's probably not the case either. So if we all can just open up and to listen to what somebody else has to say and understand, and you might not understand everything, but at least have the communication, go back and forth and go, this is what I'm hearing. I think the world would be a better place. So I mean, you listening to the guests you have, I think that's great. With collectively, they're telling you to do this, right? And that can easily work for us to go into your podcast a little bit, right? You went through all this stuff, and you're reaching out to all these people, interviewing them, and you're becoming like this magnet, right? You're just sucking all this information in from all these different traumas or whatever, and you're using it, right? You're using all this stuff as a tool for yourself, what you supply and share with the rest of the world. So over time, you're going to have so much built up and go, look, this is what worked for 15 out of 20 people that I interviewed, try this, So, I mean, I know your podcast is doomed to bloom, right? So why the title?
So I actually did a makeover not too long ago. So if anybody was listening in the beginning, it was called the I Am podcast. I'm starting to get really big on affirmations, following I am and having them be positive. I often have a lot of negative self-talk, so it's always like, what's an example? I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not blank, so I won't get that promotion. Whatever it is, I struggle with those more often than not. And so that was the original reason I wanted the title to be I Am, because I wanted it to focus on positive things that we can continue to tell ourselves. And over time, I still follow that with episode titles, but the name changed from the I Am podcast, partially because I just didn't like it, but also because I think Doomed to Bloom really shows that there is a journey from, the darkness into the light. And it's not necessarily linear. It's not necessarily a straight journey, but at some point, somebody will go from the darkness, the drowning in the sorrows and the addiction, whatever it is, the doom, as I refer it to, and eventually through whatever modalities it could be, hospital, rehab, treatment, medication, whatever it is, they will slowly start to work their way back up to the bloom. And so that's partly also why the logo has a skull, because that's like the doom where, your mind is slowly eating away at you, whether it's mental health or addiction. And then the flowers at the top of the skull show that you're actually thriving and you're blooming. You're in that, positive state where you wanted to be, and it just took a while to get there, and that's okay. But doomed to bloom just means, we talk about the darkness, but we also talk about what it's like to be in the light and starting to thrive, starting to feel better. It also refers to recovery, and the podcast talks about recovery as well, but not necessarily with addiction. Absolutely, we talk about addiction, recovery, and sobriety, but we also talk about recovery from self-harm, from eating disorders, from people pleasing, like a whole bunch of different things. And so it just really encompasses people's journey from sometimes where they start or where they get to becoming who they actually want to be, or a better version of themselves, or just being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that they know it's not going to be dark forever.
Great. And I believe there's always some kind of light available to everybody, but you just got to take that step and go forward, and then it just gets wider and wider, right? And brighter too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So like, what kind of guests are you looking for, and who do you have on your podcast?
So I think good question. There's pretty much everybody. Like I kind of mentioned before, everybody struggles with something at some point in time. I'm going to say I don't care what the struggle is or for how long in the sense of them guessing, but I absolutely do care that they're struggling. I've had people on that are in recovery from addiction, people that have experienced betrayal from their partners or their family and what that's like to not talk with their families anymore. I've had people in recovery from eating disorders, people that are grief counselors, personal trainers, how they take more of a trauma-informed care approach. So, actually listening to the body, what does the body want, instead of just go harder, go stronger, put more weight on, actually listening to what our body might need at the time. Some of the other ones, there's been quite a few that are talking more about holistic modalities. So somatic work, whatever you're thinking or feeling in your body, and then how we can get that to release from the body. There's been a lot of therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists. I've had a few dietitians just talking about the benefits of healthy eating or healthy lifestyle for just medication and family and just life in general, and how, eating better makes you feel better, and kind of that cycle of how that works. I really, honestly, anybody that can speak to either a personal experience of mental health or trauma or addiction, or more of a professional lens. I think there's really no criteria in the sense of who is a guest, but just as long as they can share either a story or like insight or knowledge into, either their story or how they can help others, or the work that they do that does help others. A really big focus that I do want, though, is just, and again, I don't mind that there's been, 4 or 5 different therapists, because despite how they're trained and how they're educated, they all do things a little differently. And at some point, maybe there's a quote that said that really sticks with somebody else that the other therapist didn't say. So I'm happy to have kind of repeat professionals on, but I really do enjoy having the wide range that people will talk about different modalities. I had somebody on, Nick, actually, who's a former RCMP and police officer, and he talked about very holistic healing modalities of, I don't know what they're called, psychedelics, magic mushrooms. And then I had somebody else come on and talk about Reiki therapy, or somebody else came on and talked about like essential oils. I just love that it's encompassing everything, because not everybody is going to want holistic supports or healing, and not everybody is going to necessarily want the kind of Western medicine, take this medication and go to talk therapy. So I try to just include a lot of modalities that some of us may not know are available, and then they can go seek it out should they want to, or research more and just understand more. But I'm even learning that, magic mushrooms I didn't know was actually had a healing component to it. So even though, again, I'm a professional in the mental health trauma field, I'm still learning all of the time. And I think that's really, again, one of the 2 goals for the podcast, right? The first was to break down just stigma in general, and the second is to raise awareness and just talk and educate. And so people are learning constantly through me sharing my story and through others sharing their stories, but also we're learning, maybe this medication isn't for this diagnosis, but there's this modality that's out there, or there's this practice, or there's this therapy method. So we're constantly learning and growing, and just supporting each other and empowering each other on the healing journey of whatever they're trying to heal from.
Yeah, and whatever works for somebody might not work for somebody else, right? And same thing with the different therapists you have on, right? Somebody might connect with that one person and not the other four, So it all makes sense, right? I mean, why would you just stick with one, and then hey, this is the person you got to go talk to? Well, it doesn't happen that way. I'm not gonna lie, this question's not mine. I was just on a podcast, and he asked me this because I was on a podcaster too. But I'm gonna ask you what he asked me. What one episode sticks out that you could just name off the top of your head that was a good episode that you had?
Oh, geez.
I know, right?
Can I just say they're all good?
I know. I tried that too. I was like, all right, here's one. So, but yeah, just which one clicks real quick?
I think it's probably safe to say that there's two, as soon as you asked me, that came to mind. The first one, and bear with me, I don't know the titles or the episode numbers off the top of my head, but the first one was Jason Lennox. He shared his story of struggling with substance, struggling with grief and mental health, kind of went through the legal system, through incarceration, tried treatment, had a few deaths, and completely did a 360. And now he owns his own business. He's a public speaker. He's an author. I think that was one of my very first couple guests. And he's stuck with me. Despite all of the episodes I now have, he's been the one that always sticks out, just because some of the other guests will share their story, and again, not to compare people's traumas, because I absolutely don't want to do that, but he's just a really big source of inspiration to me, that you can be at the bottom, darkest place and you can still rise up, you can still bloom, you can still thrive. And he's absolutely done that over and over again. And the other one that always sticks to me was Lisa. She did an episode with me on grief, and our whole conversation, Jon, about my friend being killed and kind of that journey over the last 11 years. That episode was exactly what I needed 11 years ago, and throughout the years too. She mentioned that, there's grief and then there's compounding grief. So grief is often maybe one solo event that happened, and compounding is, you had 6 different incidents that happened, and now you don't know if your grief is for the one or if it's for the 5th thing that happened or the 2nd thing that happened. But that doesn't matter because it's still grief. And Lisa just did a phenomenal job talking about how we experience grief, and, that there's no timeline to it. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And she talked about all of these steps for how to grieve in a more healthy way, and how to not grieve, but also how to support others. And that's exactly what I needed, 10, 11 years ago. So I got phenomenal feedback about that episode because, unfortunately everybody grieves something. And the other big piece she mentioned was, I think as a society, when we hear grief, we think a passing of a loved one. But she also talked that grief could be the loss of your identity. Maybe you were a firefighter and you had to resign, and now you can't identify as a firefighter, or grief from a relationship ending, grief from moving, grief from, just one chapter closing and another one starting. So I think hers was really powerful in the sense that it just reminds people that you can grieve for however long you need to grieve, for how you need to grieve. And, it's nobody's business to ask you or tell you how you should or shouldn't grieve. So long-winded answer, but I think those are the 2 episodes that really stick with me.
All right. And, and I did have the chance to have Jason on mine, so I know where you're coming from, sharing his story. And he was down to earth, and he was a great guy to listen to and talk to, even outside of the podcast. I have connections with him, and I'm maybe you do too as well. And, he's always available if needed. But, no, that's really great. So how does somebody connect with you, whether it's about a podcast or just getting to know you a little bit more, or whatever else you can do to help them?
So if anybody wants to connect, I'm on most socials. My kind of main platform right now that I'm sticking to is Instagram, but you can follow me there at Doom to Bloom Podcast 2022. I'm on TikTok. Doom to Bloom Pod, I believe, is the handle there. YouTube, Doom to Bloom Podcast. There's nothing posted yet, but I'm in the works of it with the help of Jon. I'm also on Facebook, Doom to Bloom Podcast. There's a page there. You're welcome to add me on Facebook. My personal one is just Jaclyn Danielle. It should say that it's a digital creator profile, so that one would be me. My email is all over all of those socials. You can message directly, DM. Happy to chat with anybody. If anybody's interested in guesting, those are usually the avenues as well that I have people reach out to be a guest. On Facebook and on Instagram, there is a contact me section. So if that's what anybody's looking for, feel free to use those. But I can be found on most places that social media is a thing now, except for Twitter. So I can't get behind Twitter.
That's all right. You're all over the place on Reddit. So my last question to you is, what are 3 key things you've learned and used along the journey?
Oh, genius. Do they have to be 3 different ones that I've already shared?
You can share whatever you want. And if it's the same things, go for it. I know you share a lot. And that's what happens to most of my guests. It's their journey, right? And then they learn, throughout the journey, like, these are the stuff I do. So, I mean, what 3 things would it be for you?
Okay, in no particular order, I think one of them would be boundaries. Create boundaries and maintain and enforce them, because if not, people are going to walk all over you and you're going to continue those people-pleasing tendencies if you have them, or you're just going to continue to feel stuck. You're going to continue to kind of be that yes man when you really want to say no. And that can really create an internal conflict too. So boundaries, I think, would be one of the 3. Another one would be to take care of yourself. I know I definitely, kind of when my journey started, I'd say about like grade 8, 13, 14 years old, I definitely really didn't take care of myself. I'm getting better, but it's definitely, it's a work in progress. And I think that's a journey in itself. But taking care of yourself and whatever that looks like, if you need medication, if you need to talk about it, stretch your body, move your body, eat nutritious foods, rest when your body wants you to, have that social system to connect, but also be able to have alone time, literally whatever your body needs or what you need, actually listening to it rather than just putting it off. We live in such a hustle culture that makes it really difficult, especially from me working 2 jobs in the podcast, but work in progress. I'm getting there. But really listening to your body and just trying to take care of yourself better. And the third one, I think, would be community. Find a community. And again, it doesn't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be, a whole group of somebody that struggled with an eating disorder or somebody that struggled with, say, recovery. Just a community that understands you and supports you and wants the best for you and will cheer you on. I never really had a sense of community up until the podcast. I mean, I've had phenomenal support systems kind of throughout my journey, and a lot of them are still in place right now. I still have amazing friends that are always there. I have a partner now who is supportive, but I think it's a different sense of community, because not necessarily the friends or family that you're connected with understand your struggles, or maybe they're not at a place where they want to listen to it or hear about it. But the community from the podcast has been absolutely phenomenal. I have a lot of them reaching out to me. They've been a guest before, and so we'll be in touch. They'll send me messages like, hope your day's well, or happy Friday. What's one thing you need to do for yourself? And they're just giving reminders that, yes, I'm the face of the podcast, but I also, need to preach, or sorry, I need to practice what I'm preaching as well. And they're all over the world. I know some from the States now. I know you from the States. I know a couple girls on the west coast of Canada now, over in BC and Alberta. Somebody from, I think it's the Czech Republic, a lot in the UK. So it's just everywhere, but it's a sense of community that, they didn't necessarily struggle with what I struggled with per se, but they understand the struggle, and they're there to listen, to support, and they really just show that no matter what time it is or wherever you are, if somebody wants to support you, they will support you. So I think those would be the top 3 kind of big ones. There's more, but those are probably the top 3.
Right. Yeah.
No, I could go on for hours about them, but
well, yeah, you're sharing what's worked for you, right? I mean, and that's good. So you're reflecting on everything that's come together in all this experience so you can share with others. The community one is great. I probably wouldn't say that people probably shared it to me before, as in like your surroundings, right? The people that I hang out with the most and stuff. So that I could definitely see. It's definitely a big game changer for who you're talking to and who's listening to you, right? And you just reminded me of something before. I say, it's almost the end of it, but there was a small clip, and I think it was Simon Sinek, I think is his name, and I don't know, he's big in self-development or something like that, right? And he's like, but if you're gonna cry, don't cry by yourself, And he's big in like somebody calling him up and just like let it out, you know what I mean? So like, and to have all these people as guests or whoever it is, if you just reach out to somebody that because your therapist is busy, and you just go, and I think that's great. I think having somebody, 100 some people, and you can connect with one at any given time will be great. Jaclyn, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your journey in life and everything else that you're doing to help others. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Finally.
I know, right? And and maybe we'll have to do it again sometime too down the road. As soon as we continue to do our podcast and reach out to a bunch of different people. But no, I appreciate your time and sharing everything. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for the platform and the space for people to share their journeys. And I think it would be similar to the guests that I have on mine. I mean, we do swap guests, so there'll be some of the similar ones, but I think just anybody listening as well to any of your episodes are going to get life lessons or tips or tricks on how to navigate struggles and journeys anyways, right? So thank you for having the space for us to share those journeys, but also for allowing people to be able to check out your space and possibly get that information that they might need.
Yeah, thank you. And so between the both of us, just keep going. Just keep doing what you're doing, because a lot of people are going to do what we're doing and we're just going to drop off. And then we won't have the space to share. So, just keep moving. So thank you.
Swimming.
Just keep swimming. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks.
Thank you.